everybody, my name is Dan, courtesy of MTG Tavern, and today I'd like to introduce you to a vast improvement on my world famous mono red living end build. This build has the potential to kill somebody on turn 1, and more often than you think will kill on at least turn 2. Oh, and by the way, it costs 25 tickets on MTGO. This is absurdly aggressive, I don't give a fuck, balls deep, all in mono red living end. I really need to work on that title. All in Mono Red Living End started out as a deck that I wanted to build to have a bit of fun so that I could potentially win a game on turn 1 or maybe even turn 2. I started out with the Zealous Conscripts and Kiki Jiki combo, however the problem with this version is that you have to have both of these cards in your graveyard to have any chance of winning on turns 1 or 2. And individually they both kind of suck. I knew the combo would have to involve probably Urabrask, as it would have to give our creatures haste on turn 1. So I searched Gavra for some big fuck off red creatures we could put into our graveyard, which would go really well with the Urabrask on turn 1, but would also be reasonably useful if we didn't have Urabrask on turns 2 or 3. I randomly came across Modern All-Star Angrath's Marauders from Ixalan block. Now, even though I'm sure absolutely all of you remember Angrath's Marauders, I'll quickly go back over the card now. Angrath's Marauders doubles all of our damage we can do to our opponent or any permanents they control. Now, this isn't just relevant to the creatures we reanimate. It also turns any excess Electro Dominances into a bit of reach, so we might be able to kill our opponent out of nowhere. Now, before we get into the deck tech, I have to emphasise here that playing this deck, you have to be aggressive and get your opponent on the back foot. If you lose momentum, you are absolutely fucked. I'm going to begin this deck tech unusually with the land base because I love it. 16 mountains, we're done. You can't get a much better land base for a budget deck than that in Modern. To make up for the lack of lands, we've got 4 Simian Spirit Guides, which again helps us with that turn 1 or turn 2 win. And then the obvious combo of Electro Dominance and Living End, we've got 4 of each copy in here. Everyone knows about the combo by now, I'm not going to go over it. Now on to the fun part of the deck. First of all, the discard outlets. We're going to start with Faithless Looting. Really powerful in this deck. Without a Faithless Looting, we don't get a turn 1 or realistically a turn 2 win. We have 3 Cathartic Reunions. Don't underestimate the power of a Cathartic Reunion using a Simian Spirit Guide on turn 1. That gets to put good cards into your graveyard and you get to draw 3 more cards. And finally, 3 Insolent Neonates, probably the worst card out of the 3, but it's probably the best remaining discard outlet we have. So what are we looking to discard? Well, there is the 4 of Angrath's Marauders and the 3 Urabrask the Hidden, which are probably the best cards we want to discard to Faithless Looting or a Cathartic Reunion. We can also pitch stuff that has cycling, so a Desert Celadon, a Monstrous Carabid, or a Street Wraith, which, while we aren't actually cycling them, it does mean we can pitch cards that we're quite happy being in our graveyard. Finally, we have 4 Hollow Ones, and whilst we would rather not be discarding these ones, again it's perfectly fine to pop these into our graveyard if we feel like we're going to be reanimating them pretty soon. Otherwise, it's quite easy in this deck to get these guys cast on turns 1, 2 or 3, as you would do in a normal Hollow One build. And this is our way of dealing with graveyard hate. Sure, our opponent can have that turn 2 rest in peace, but we can still pop down a couple of Hollow Ones and win through the graveyard hate. Now you will note, outside of the Electro Dominance, there is no interaction in this deck. We need to be very fast and hyper aggressive. We are saving interaction for our sideboard, where we have 4 Lightning Bolts and a Lightning Axe. That's our removal. We have 3 Anger of the Gods as a board wipe, 4 Fairy Macabres for graveyard hate. Also note, you can discard this card so it does count towards A, the turn 1 wins after sideboarding, and B, reducing the cost of Hollow One. And finally 3 Ingot Chewers to deal with any of those pesky artifacts. Now, people have been asking me on the Living End Facebook group, why no Blood Moon in the sideboard and why no Karizev's Expertise in the main? And the basic answer is they cost 3 mana, and that's way too much for this deck. You will notice, outside of the Anger of the Gods, which we pretty much have to have in the deck because of Banned Spirits, Dredge, Humans, there are no cards that realistically cost more than 2 mana to cast. And that is the end of the deck tech. That was incredibly quick, kind of on theme with how this deck wants to be. Fast, in your face, and over before you've had a chance to blink. Now you guys may be asking, how the hell does this deck win on turn 1? And the answer is you kind of need a magical Christmas land kind of hand, but it is, in theory, possible. The first step is to get a Faithless Looting on turn 1 and put an Angrath's Marauders and an Urabrask in our graveyard. With haste and essentially double strike, we can deal 16 points of damage to our opponent. If we just add a Street Wraith to that combination, so we can cycle a Street Wraith on turn 1 as well, all of a sudden, that's 22 points of damage on turn 1. Now that part is pretty simple. We get a Faithless Looting, we get the 2 good creatures into our graveyard, plus a Street Wraith. It's pretty reasonable. Well, we also need 2 Simian Spirit Guides, an Electro Dominance, and a Living End. So being realistic, we're probably not going to see a turn 1 kill, although it is in theory possible. Forgetting the dream world, we're probably looking at a turn 2 kill. And it's not that unrealistic. In fact, I've already done it 3 or 4 times in the 20 matches I've played with this deck. Now, before we get into the gameplay, if you guys would like to see more mono red all-in Living End, I'm going to be streaming it live right now as soon as I upload this video to YouTube. That's twitch.tv/MTG Tavern. I will put a link in the description. I hope to see you there.
Rolling around at the speed of sound. Got places to go, gotta follow my rainbow.
Now in match 1, unfortunately because I'm a complete dumbass, I forgot to hit record on OBS, so I had to go back and use the MTGO replay system, which is about as pleasant as wiping your ass with sandpaper. We begin the game with a meh kind of hand, plenty of mana, some cyclers and part of the combo, we're gonna keep it. We play a mountain, we pass to our opponent, they play a mountain of their own and a Soul Scar Mage. We cycle a Desert Ceradon, we're gonna have to be quick in this one, this is obviously mono red burn. We draw into a Cathartic Reunion and then a Faithless Looting off the top. We go ahead and Cathartic Reunion, pitching the Desert Ceradon and an Angrath's Marauders, and we draw into the Living End combo and a Simian Spirit Guide. We have a kill next turn. We exile the Spirit Guides, Electro Dominance, Living End, you guys know the combo. We put a mere 16 points of power that deals double damage onto the battlefield. Our opponent casts Faithless Looting, and long story short, they get a couple of Arclight Phoenixes out. We go ahead and attack, our opponent blocks like a complete dumbass, they probably didn't really read Angrath's Marauders, and we take down game 1. That is how quick this deck can be. Now, unfortunately, because again, I'm a dumbass and I didn't record the games, I can't show you sideboarding, but what I can tell you is that I made no changes. I don't give a rat's ass. Our way of beating mono red is to be playing a faster mono red. Our opening hand has a Street Wraith, a Simian Spirit Guide, and a Cathartic Reunion. That's 4 fresh cards whilst discarding a whole bunch. We cycle the Street Wraith, we draw a Desert Ceradon. We exile the Simian Spirit Guide, cast a Cathartic Reunion, and holy shit, our opponent concedes. In match 2, I make the brilliant start of hitting record on OBS. We open an opening hand that has plenty of cyclers and some discard outlets. No combo pieces, but those are for fools anyway. We want to cycle, and hopefully find the pieces we need. We put down an Insolent Neonate, and we pass back to our opponent. They start with a Forest. That's not going to disrupt our hand. And an Arbor Elf, dirty Ponza. We need to find lands. We find a copy of Street Wraith off the top. Don't give a fuck. Cycle 2 life. Who cares about life totals in this match anyway? We put down a second Insolent Neonate, get in for a point of damage, and over to our opponent. They untap and play a mountain and then Stone Rainus, you bloody filthy Ponza player. We cycle a Monstrous Carabit in response. That's the good thing about Living End against Ponza, you are able to use your mana most of the time. Now we just need to find lands and both parts of the combo, which is pretty unlikely. We're getting for 2 points of damage with the Insolent Neonates. I'm sure our opponent is quaking on 16 points of life. We cycle a Desert Ceradon and we find a Simian Spirit Guide. Now we just need to find an Electro Dominance. I pitched the Monstrous Carabid to a Insolent Neonate. A Mountain will do for now. We'll pop that one down and at least we have 2 mana for next turn. Our opponent plays a Tireless Tracker and of course they always have the fucking fetch land with a Tireless Tracker as well. At this point, I feel like we're starting to fall quite far behind. We need to make sure we can get rid of this thing off the battlefield soon. We find a Faithless Looting, which actually isn't that bad. It's going to help us delve a little bit lower into our library. We cast said looting, we find a Simian Spirit Guide and a land. While lands are very nice to find, they are all funky-dunky, we do need to actually win the game at some point. We pitch the Angrath Marauders and the Monstrous Carabid. We play the land, and we pitch Orangutan Titties to the Insolent Neonate. We find a mountain off the top. Our opponent cracks a clue, plays a land to get another clue, and then they stone rain us again. Now, actually, I don't really care about that. We're kind of fine on lands, and we have a Simian Spirit Guide anyway. They get in for 5 points of damage. We untap and we find the frickin' Electro Dominance. It's turn 5. This is too slow. Our opponent cracks another clue token. They get a +1/+1 counter on their tireless tracker. They crack another clue token. They play a mountain and get another clue token. Now they molten rain us, but it's too bloody late, my friend. The game is now over. Your PONZA badness doth not outspeed our Electro Dominance Living End goodness. They get in for 6 points of damage. We Electro Dominance, we Living End, and we laugh in their face. For what it's worth, at the minute, we have 35 points of power on the field, and by dealing double damage thanks to the Marauders, we essentially have 70 points of power on the board. Not that bad, even if it's a bit slow. I decided to bring in the Lightning Bolts and the Lightning Axe, and trim an Angrath's Marauders. We also go down on Orobrask. I feel like we're just not going to have enough time to set up our graveyard in this matchup, and instead I'd like to be able to loot a bit more and find some removal spells. For that reason, we trim a Cathartic Reunion and one of the Monstrous Carabids. Our opening hand is extremely risky. We have one mountain, but the rest of the hand is really, really good. If we don't find the second mountain and our opponent has some of those stone rainy kind of effects, then Mono Red Living End will be about as successful as an ad I put out on the Magic the Gathering Facebook trade group recently. Our opponent leads with Relic of Progenitus. What a pain in the ass. We begin with Faithless Looting, we find an Insolent Neonate and a basic mountain. Remember guys, fortune always favours the dumbasses like me. Our opponent plays a Stomping Ground but tapped. That's got to be good for us. There's no turn 1 or turn 2 play that we're really scared of. We untap, we find a Hollow One. We can definitely get that down this turn. Let's just hope we can find a few more so we don't have to care about that pesky relic. We Faithless Looting, we find 2 Desert Ceridones. I decided to pitch 1 Desert Ceridon plus a Lightning Axe because I'd like to be able to cycle the other Desert Ceridon when we're ready. With Street Wraith, we find a basic mountain. Not great, we'd rather find the Hollow Ones right now, but I'm perfectly happy with a basic mountain as well. We cycle a Desert Ceridon, we find another basic mountain. We cast the Hollow One and hope to God this is good enough. Our opponent cracks Relic, I'm perfectly happy with that. That means it's off the board and we can maybe set up a graveyard going forward. They play a basic mountain and they Stone Rain us. Unlucky fella, we have 2 more left in our hand. We get in for 4 points of damage, and our opponent takes it like a little bitch. Our opponent casts another Stone Rain, don't care, got another mountain in our hand. They shock themselves and play a Relic of Progenitus, don't care, got a Hollow One on the field. We untap, we find a Street Wraith. We're getting for 4 points of damage with the Hollow One. Our opponent's now on 10, and if they take 1 more hit from the Hollow One, we can burn them out with Lightning Bolts next turn. Our opponent casts a Tireless Tracker, and as per fucking usual again, they always have the bloody fetch land. We find a basic mountain off the top. We get in with Hollow One, and I'm hoping my opponent goes to crack the Verdant Catacombs, and then we can Lightning Bolt the Tireless Tracker in response. Unfortunately, I'm a dumbass and just let it resolve, and they get the clue token from the Tireless Tracker. They crack a clue token, and in response, we Lightning Bolt the little fella down. No blocks for you, dear sir. No blocks for you. Our opponent goes down to 5. I decide to cycle the Street Wraith. We might find something good. We cycle a Desert Ceridon, and another Hollow One. I don't know how our opponent gets out of this position now. There are 2 Hollow Ones, and either one of them is lethal. Our opponent plays a Utopia Sprawl, which is not much use right now. Those manas they're producing have got to actually deal with both Hollow Ones. They cast a Glorybringer, and that signals the end of the game. Sure, they can kill one of our Hollow Ones, but the other one will deal 4 of their remaining 5 points of damage, and a Lightning Bolt will tell them to sit the fuck down. And we may win this match, but I'm really not happy. It was way too slow. That was a turn 5 and a turn 6 win. This deck should be obliterating its opponents in 3 or 4 turns. And that turn 1 win still eludes us. Maybe we can do better in the next match. After game 2, I decide to make some adjustments. We've got too many lands. We need to get this turn 1 win, and lands are not really going to help us get there. We cut 1 land and bring in another Marauders. We also cut a Monstrous Carabid and go with a Cathartic Reunion, so we can maybe draw some more cards in the early part of the game. We begin game 1 with plenty of discard outlets and part of the combo, but nothing we really want to discard. We're hoping the Faithless Looting does us good. We Faithless Looting, we find a Hollow One and a second Electro Dominance. I decide to go ahead and pitch the Electro Dominance and one of the mountains. It is a bit awkward having all of these cathartic reunions in our hand, but hopefully we can draw into more of these creatures we want to discard. Our opponent shocks themselves, gets in for a point of damage with Monetary Suspect. Who cares? It's burn, whatever. No one came here to watch burn. We untap and we find a second Faithless Looting. Now that's going to guarantee the hollow one this turn as a minimum. We find a land and a Simian Spirit Guide. I decide to pitch the Simian Spirit Guide and one of the Cathartic Reunions. We cast a hollow one for just the grand total of 1 mana, and we pass back to our opponent, who just has the mighty turn of Lava Spike. Go! No second land and no attack with a Monetary Swift Spear. We untap, we find another mountain, we Cathartic Reunion those away, and we draw ourselves into Monstrous Carabids and a Street Wraith. We cycle the Street Wraith, and we find another mountain. We play the mountain, cycle a Monstrous Carabid, fingers crossed for another hollow one. Holy shit, we made it. The original hollow one bitch slaps our opponent for a total of 4 damage, and we pass back to them. Our opponent suspends a Rift Bolt and still no second land. I'm not really liking their chances right now. We draw into a Simian Spirit Guide, we cycle the Monstrous Carabid, we draw into a second Monstrous Carabid. We cycle that one and we draw into an Angrath's Marauders. I'm so not scared of my life total, I decide to slap my opponent for 8 points of damage. Our opponent surprisingly takes the entire lot, Rift Bolt comes off suspend, and it targets a hollow one. Now let me tell you right now, having a burn player use their Rift Bolt to burn one of your creatures is one of the best feelings ever. They follow up with a Lightning Bolt to said hollow one, and our opponent just use 6 points of burn power to kill a hollow one. They get in for 3 points of damage with a Swift Spear, and little do they know, with the Electro Dominance in our hand plus the 4 points of damage from the hollow one, they are dead. The Electro Dominance will deal 2 points of damage without having to cast a spell afterwards. You want to know how you show ultimate BM to a burn deck when you're really not scared of them? Make no sideboard changes, even though you've got Street Wraiths in your deck. Fuck making changes, we've got a match to win here, and we need that turn 1 win. We continue the BM in game 2 by keeping a hand that has 4 lands in it along with 2 Faithless Lootings. Couldn't give a rat's ass. Our opponent plays a Bloodstained Mire and does nothing. We untap, we find a 5th land. Not great, but who cares? We've got these Faithless Lootings. They're going to get us there. I'm sure we'll not draw any more lands for the rest of the game. I decide to wait until next turn because then we can go 5 cards deep for a potential hollow one and life will be good. Our opponent casts an Eidolon of the Great Revel. That is actually a problem. Maybe I was too much of a BM kind of guy. We draw our 6th land. That doesn't sound like MTGO whatsoever. We Faithless Looting, we take 2 points of damage, a mere flesh wound. We find Angrath's Marauders and a Monstrous Carabid. I decide to discard both of those cards because we've got another Faithless Looting, we can pitch some lands to that anyway, who cares. We take 2 more points of damage, it's starting to become a bit of a bumsaw now, that's Eidolon of the Great Revel, but who cares when you can top deck perfectly. We put the Urabrask in a mountain into the graveyard. Next turn, we have Lethal. It's also worth noting if that 2 of these lands were Simian Spirit Guides, we would have had a turn 2 win. Our opponent plays a Sacred Foundry, which is not that scary. They get in for 2 points of damage with the Eidolon. That thing has dealt 6 points of damage this game. What a pain in the ass. We find a hollow one, which is a trifle too late. Play a Mountain, and we Electro Dominance for 1, we may as well get in for a point of damage. We take 2 points of damage from the Eidolon. We cast the Living End, Eidolon gets in for its 10th point of damage this game. Doesn't matter though, turn 3, Living End, getting in for 24 points of damage with haste speed. But still, not a turn 1 win. Are we ever gonna get there? Now, a warning going into this game, do not blink, you might miss it. I decided to keep an opening hand that has the Living Ends and plenty of discard. Hopefully, we can find that Electro Dominance and put a lot of pressure on. We play a Mountain, we pass the turn, we're looking to go off next turn. Our opponent plays a River of Tears, and they play a Thoughtseize. That's a bit of a pain in the ass. But luckily we don't have the Electro Dominance and 2 copies of Living End in our hand. Our opponent takes the hollow one, like they should. However, little do they know that's going to help us next turn. We cycle the Monstrous Carabid, we find another Mountain. We untap, and we find the Electro Bloody Dominance. Would you freaking believe it? We cycle the Street Wraith, we find another Mountain, and to get around counterspells, we Electro Dominance and cast a Living End on turn 2. Now, our opponent concedes, and I would like to put the question out to you guys now, does that count as a turn 2 win? We didn't technically kill our opponent, they conceded, but it was on turn 2. We go to sideboarding, and much like before, you want to know how to sideboard like an absolute boss and show ultimate BM? Don't make any changes, give a rat's ass about what our opponent's doing. We're going to try and Living End on turn 1, get an absurd board state, and try and kill them. Our opening hand in Game 2 has an absurd start. We have 2 Faithless Lootings and 2 Hollow Ones. On turn 2, we're almost guaranteed 2 Hollow Ones. Our opponent plays a Polluted Delta with no hand disruption. That's pretty key. We find the Simian Spirit Guide. That's definitely going to be 2 Hollow Ones on turn 1 because we have the Simian Spirit Guide to cast a second Faithless Looting and we cast our Hollow Ones for free. We discard a Desert Celadon and a Mountain. We find a 3rd Hollow One. We cast all 3. Our opponent concedes. Does that count as a turn 1 win? Either way, Mono Red Living End, way too aggressive for our opponent and wrecking them like the bitches they are. Not really opponent, don't take it too personally, it's an act. So then guys, I'm assuming that you're going to say in the comments that it doesn't count as a turn 2 win because your opponent conceded before you could deal all of the damage. Well, let me show you a legitimate turn 2 win. We find a hand that has Street Wraiths, a Mountain, and a Faithless Looting. We cycle a Street Wraith, we find a second Mountain. We cycle another Street Wraith, we find the Living End. We cast a Faithless Looting, and all of a sudden, things are about to go crazy bad for our opponent. We find the Electro Dominance, and we get to pitch the Angrath's Marauders and the Urabrask in our graveyard. We have a legitimate turn 2 kill. On the assumption, our opponent isn't a dickhead who has hand disruption. They play an island, and I don't give a fuck if they've got Spell Pierce in their hand, we're going for this turn 2 kill. We play our Mountain, we Electro Dominance, we cast Living End, all of our creatures have haste and essentially double strike, and we get in for 28 points of damage on turn 2. How about that? Mono Red Living End, fucking them all up, showing ultimate BM, couldn't give a fuck about your disruption, we're gonna win this game. Now, to cut a long story short, it's Storm that we play against, and Storm is about as boring as life can be. Watching a Storm player go off is wasting my potential turn 1 time. Unfortunately, we never actually find a turn 1 win, so it was all a bit of a waste of time. So all in all, with Mono Red all in, balls deep, Living End, we really have to work on that title, we went 4-1. We did lose to Storm, but other than that, the deck kind of was too aggressive for Modern. Sure, it's not the most consistent deck ever, but it's consistent enough that it can win before your opponents can get set up. We saw an Eidolon of the Great Revel deal 10 points of damage to us over the course of 3 turns, and it still wasn't good enough for our burn opponents. We saw a control deck get absolutely annihilated in a total of 4 turns across the match. Now, I would make some changes to Mono Red Living End, and a thank you to Glauber T, who is a Living End streamer, who made this adjustment where he went 5-0 with my list in a competitive league. Glauber cut 2 of the Angrath's Marauders, 1 Urabrask, and 1 Insolent Neonate, and he put in some Flame-Blade Adepts, which allows you on turn 1, even when you're not setting up your Living End combo to win on turns 2 or 3, you're still able to get those chip points of damage away with the Flame-Blade Adept. All in all, I would absolutely recommend people play this deck because it is legitimately good. It does seem like it's going to be inconsistent, but it's really, really not. Sure, there are games where you kind of fail, I'm not saying there aren't, but those games aren't as often as you would think. You always have something that you can do with this deck, and worst case scenario, it's 25 tickets on MTGO, and it's really, really fun to play. However, like I said before, if you do play this deck, do not play afraid. You have to be aggressive, and you cannot take your foot off the accelerator. You can't care about what your opponent's doing, you just have to be faster. I hope you guys enjoyed All In, Balls Deep, Mono Red Living End. Again, we have to work on that title. I will be streaming this deck live on Twitch now, just after I've uploaded it, for those of you who might watch it within the next couple of hours. Hope to see you there. Thank you for watching. Please leave me a subscribe, and I will see you next time.